So, on behalf of Australian Musician, congratulations on the impending release of the brand new and second Smith Kotzen album coming out this week, titled Black Light, White Noise. It's a great sounding album. You
Thank
must
you.
be very excited.
Yes, yes, I'm very excited, and it's really great to be at a place where we've got two albums. Because when we did it, we didn't really know what was going to happen or have any sort of expectations, for the future. We just wanted to share the music, and so
Yeah.
now here we're in the second record, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. So I've got
Yeah.
a series of questions for you. I've got some album track questions I'd like to go through, ask some questions about your writing and recording process, and obviously some guitar player nerd gear questions I want to probe you about after.
Right.
So I will apologize for dragging you back in time a little bit. I've been watching you over the last 30 years trying to integrate your style into some of my playing at different times. So this is my selfish chance to ask you some gear questions and guitar playing
Oh, yeah.
questions. But I promise it'll
Cool.
be mostly about the album. Mostly about the album.
Well, that's fine. That's okay.
Great. So it's very obvious in those pre-song interviews. For those watching, each track has like a 30-second to 1 minute commentary by Adrian and Richie, which it seems you guys have a really fun friendship that allows that creativity to flow quite freely. And you've collaborated with quite a few artists over the years. But you get to do that with a childhood influence with Adrian, which must be cool. What's your favorite part of the creative process with Adrian?
Well, my favorite part, I don't know. I mean, I guess the whole thing of just being in the room and creating and writing, so I wouldn't say there's any one particular, you know, I don't dissect it in such a way that it would end up in parts. Basically, it's just a thing. And so it's a really cool thing. And I can tell you that the way we do this, we typically get together around the holidays because that's usually when he's in the area. We
Right.
live close by. Our house he's part-time here and part-time there, but when he's here, we live close by. And he'll come over with his laptop and open up his music software and play me ideas. And usually, it's stuff that's incomplete. There might be a riff with an idea for a chorus or, a chorus idea or this or that. And then I do the same thing with him. I'll open the computer and say, well, here's some of the ideas that I've documented, and we give it a listen. And so if we each, bring in 5 things, maybe by the end of it, we've got, 5 or 6 things between the two of us that we like, and we'll start working on them. And the way it usually goes is, we'll start with something and it gets to a certain point. So, okay, well, we've kind of run out of gas here. Let's go on to something different.
Yeah.
And so keep doing that over the course of, a couple of weeks. Ultimately, what tends to happen is we find ourselves in a position with these songs being close to being done.
Yeah.
And then we kind of sit back and think, okay, well, we almost have the makings of an album, let's go back and see what we're missing. And then with that, we kind of do some writing on the spot, and, I'll start playing a riff or he'll start playing something. And I remember one of the songs on the first album called Taking My Chances. He just started jamming that riff. And this was very interesting, what I'm about to tell you, the way the song was done. Everything was already set up for recording. I said, hey, I got an idea. I said, play that riff. I'm going to go downstairs and get on the drums, and I'm going to play it with you. And I'm going to play a song form. So just kind of follow me. We'll follow each other.
Yeah.
So when you hear my beat change as if it's the verse, play something that could be a verse, and
Nice.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's
So I did that, and so that was really how that song was kind of written. And then I came back and I kind of punched myself in on the guitar and came up with a chorus progression, and we kind of worked off of those improvised drums.
Yeah.
And then the song was built. So, and not all of them are like that. They're all different.
Yeah.
But I love that, to answer your question, like the whole thing, the whole creative process is kind of my favorite thing,
Mm.
more so than playing live. I mean, playing live is cool, but there's so many wild card variables that can happen in a live show that can really ruin your evening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
that's right.
so
Yeah,
when you're in the studio and you're in that creative zone, that's just a beautiful thing. I just really love that.
that's cool. Uh, so the album tracks, let's have a look at those. So opening with Muddy Water, which is almost like a White Room Cream intro with the harmonies, the guitar harmonies that start,
Sure.
and then you go into into that really cool rock riff, and the two guitars blend so well in that. Adrian's solo starts that. It's like a cool, really powerful, laid back solo, and then you come in with like this sideways, dissonant, wide interval thing to start your version of the solo. And I wanted to ask you, with your solos, you've got like a wide variety of styles that you've done. You know, your chromatic sort of licks and close interval funk stuff, and then full on the front foot shredding and sweeping, and even your evolution of abandoning the pick, so to speak. Um, at this point, do you plan out those solos like to be in a really contrast to Adrian, or is that just what comes out? Do you react to his solos? Do you plan yours
Yeah.
out in advance? How does it? Tell me all.
They
How does it
don't
work?
sound very planned out to me. I really just kind of go for it. That's my attitude. I mean, a lot of times, most of the times I just go for it and see what happens and
Yeah,
um, work off of that. But sometimes, if it's something more melodic, you kind of hear a melody and you can take a little more time to make sure that gets delivered, accordingly. But on that one in particular, I just kind of went for it, and that's what came out.
yeah,
That song was one that was one of the only ones that was really close to finished before Adrian came over. I had that
right.
thing pretty set, lyrics and the track was there.
Yeah,
And Adrian wrote the intro that you mentioned, that
mm,
uh
yeah,
and then when he put that on there, that's when I kind of thought, well, this would be a great way to open the album. Um, and so that's what it is. It's the
yeah. Well,
opening song. And
he cites a lot of
and
those classic influences, of course, that he loves.
yeah,
Um,
but yeah, I improvised most of that solo, you know. Yeah.
that's often the answer. I've interviewed quite a few people, and Steve Lukather was one that said the same thing. I asked this complex question about how he evolves solos and all of that, and his answer was similar to yours. I don't know, man. It kind of just comes out, and it's
Yeah, I mean,
both
because
inspirational and frustrating, but it is what it is.
not everybody's like that. Some guys like to sit down and really work it out and then go in and record it. That's cool too.
Yeah,
Um, I am, one of the things, probably the thing about playing live that keeps me coming back to playing live is the improvisation element of things. Now, I
yeah,
don't know where in my DNA that came from, because that's typically more of a jazzer kind of thing, and
mm,
you know, probably more of a rocker at heart. But I love the potential of creativity on the spot and
yeah,
not really knowing what's going to happen. Now, in order to do that, you have to have musicians playing with you that are of a similar mind.
yeah,
Because if you don't, then that would be chaotic and disastrous and stifling.
yeah.
But if you team up with the right group of folks, it can be a really rewarding experience. It's almost like being in the studio only on stage.
Speaking of that, how
So
many?
that's great.
I noticed that
What?
you're credited with drums on there, but you didn't say anything about in those interviews I could hear anyway about what songs you play drums on. Did you play drums on most of the tracks, or just here and there? What?
Maybe most of the tracks by
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
by one,
okay,
yeah, 10 songs. Maybe I'm on six,
right, okay,
or seven. I'm not sure, but that comes together. It's kind of funny because like in the video, like on the White Noise video, like Bruno is playing, but what you're hearing is me.
yeah,
So it's kind of it's kind
yeah.
of funny,
So
but
actually,
he's
that
he's
comes
a
on
great drummer. He's a fantastic
on the
drummer.
yeah
I
white
can't
noise, and
play as good as him.
you can't. Well, it doesn't come
No,
across
nowhere
like
close,
that.
nowhere near. No.
Right.
Yeah.
So into White Noise and Black Light, both just great tracks. They're the perfect singles for the album, as far as I'm concerned. Listening to those, and then you named the album the combination of those two songs. Did the album title come first? Did those two songs come first, and you jammed the titles together for the
Ah,
album?
yeah. Well, the songs came first,
Right. Yeah.
and what happened was we sequenced the album, and management came up with the idea of the title.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
what do you think about this? And I liked it right away. I thought, well, that's a cool title.
Yeah.
And so Adrian liked it as well. So, we went with it.
Yeah.
And I like it because, I don't know, just two different things kind of put together.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. It's like a real contrast. Yeah. It's a yin and
Yeah.
yang type of
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. There you go. Yin
Yeah.
and yang.
There you go. So Dark Side, opening with that sort of droning D flat, like reminiscent of that American South swampy type. I found myself using swampy a lot when I was describing this
Hmm.
album. It's
What song did you say?
Dark Side.
Dark Side. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And between you and Adrian, it really shows off your soulful vocals in that, I think, too. And that's in that solo, or kind of the instrumental type part of the solo. I think it's the first time we hear like a uni vibe or a rotor vibe or something in there. What's your preferred flavor of that effect at the moment?
Well, for years, I used this Mesa Boogie rotating speaker.
Hmm.
And so, it's relatively elaborate because you have to have a separate amp for it and you have to split your
Yeah,
signal. And I used to play live with it, and it really sounds great when you have that going. Oh, my email's kicking off here. When you have that happening. But in the instance you're talking about, it's my fly rig. There's a Leslie
right.
simulation
Yeah,
effect in there,
yeah,
and you can control the speed on it as well. There's a foot switch. And so that's what you're hearing. And it's just something to kind of separate, Adrian and I a little bit. If I
yeah.
throw that on, he doesn't really use that effect. So I can put that on, and, so nobody gets confused.
Yeah, well, your tones seem quite separate. I mean, I know you're playing really well, but certainly listening to it, it feels like tonally you blend really well, but it's very obvious who's playing.
Yeah, and a lot of times we're playing through the same amp.
Right. Okay.
It's
That
really
goes to my
interesting.
next question. The
Yeah.
the gear you tend to. It seems over the years when I've seen you interview, it's like you like the least amount of interruption between guitar and amp, and you like a percussive amp, like something loud. Um,
Yeah.
but in the recording process, do you tend to just use whatever's plugged in? Do you specifically sit there and nerd out about mic positions and everything else? What
Uh,
do you run the fly rig direct sometimes? Like what happens?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, primarily, okay, so it's most of the time an amplifier, like
Mhm.
95% of the time. Sometimes I do go direct for a clean sound.
Yeah.
But the amplifier that's sitting here is a Marshall. The model is 1959. It's basically the Plexi, the 4-input 100-watt Plexi
Yeah.
that everyone has used.
Yeah.
And I've got quite a few of them. I have one that's from 1968 or 69.
Nice.
It's a super lead bass,
Yeah. Yeah.
really cool. I didn't use that on this record because it's blowing fuses lately. So, but I have used it in the past. But the one I used on this album is a hand wired one, and it
Right.
just happens to be orange in color,
Oh,
which
nice.
does not affect the sound, but it certainly looks. Yeah.
Colex usually doesn't affect the sound. That's right.
Yeah.
So, on to Life Unchained.
Mm.
Again, in that pre-song commentary, you didn't remember you came up with the title. Adrian remembered. You two, I think, are quite unintentionally maybe hilarious when you talk about your creative process.
Really?
Almost, yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's almost a little Spinal Tap-ish at times. It was great.
Oh,
It really
give
shows
me an
that.
example. Like
It was cool.
how?
Well,
How so?
well, that one I think where you're like Adrian's describing how you come up with this title, and you're like, really? Was that me? Did I do that? Did I do that?
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
So there's,
yeah.
but it shows that friendship, that sort of fun friendship that you guys obviously have. It's
Yeah.
it's cool to listen to.
I
Um,
probably shouldn't say this, but that song, the working title of that song was "Suicide Ballad."
nice.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so
right.
I knew we had to write a better lyric than that. So I came up with "Beyond the Pale."
Nice.
Um, but the intro and the verse, Adrian had brought that in, and
Yeah.
then I worked up a chorus to it, and then also that outro. I wanted to do something that was I don't know, like a departure, you know.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
my mind, I was kind of thinking about like Layla, like the way that song
Yeah.
ends.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do something like that. And then we forgot about the song. Somehow it was like, oh yeah, we might not put that on the album. And then one day he called me. He's like, Beyond the Pale, have you listened to that lately? And I said, no, I haven't listened to anything lately.
Yeah.
So then we, revisited the song. And there you go.
And it comes up. So,
Yeah.
how hands-on do you get in the mixing process? I know Jay Ruston, is it that mixed the album?
Yeah.
Are you sitting over his shoulder? Are you the guy that hovers there and talks about what you want in each specific track?
Well, I try to, both Adrian and I try to make it pretty obvious what we want, because what happens is, um, like on the first album, when we gave it to Kevin Shirley, he mixes on an old, uh, you know, classic mixing board.
Yeah.
So he just wanted the, he's like, send me the music as if you were sending me a reel of 2-inch tape. And so I had a 2-inch tape machine for years, so I know what he meant. So
Yeah.
I gave it to him. So in that instance, there was more conversation, like
Mm-hmm.
back and forth, like this, and I'd like to hear this, I'd like to hear that. This time around, everything happened within Pro Tools.
Yeah.
So
Right.
by the time, I gave it to Jay, some of the things that Adrian and I wanted to achieve, we didn't really have to say anything because it was kind of obvious when you
Right.
open the session what we were trying to achieve with the delay sends and the reverb sends and
Right. Yeah.
things, some automation here and there. So, it was like, all right, Jay, do this, but make it sound better. You know what I mean?
Nice.
Because he
Yeah.
knows all sorts of cool tricks, and he's got great ears and great taste,
Yeah.
which is the most important thing. So, I just basically handed him off the sessions, and it's a weird situation because like these records were not made in the way that you would make a record, in the sense like in the old days you would likely like make a demo
Mm.
and then live with it, and then maybe think, oh, I want to change this, I want to change that. This stuff is recorded once, you know.
Right.
And so what happens is sometimes some of the stuff might not be recorded as if it was going to be an album, but the performance is really good.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't want to really change that because it's working and this is inspiring that to work the way it does and it fits. So, you know, there might have been a bit of struggle for Jay to kind of bring to life some of the things that might have been recorded in haste.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
But I think he did a fantastic job, and both Adrian and I love the way the record sounds. So we're very pleased with his contribution.
Yeah. It sounds fantastic. Um, I love that Adrian's so candid with his influences. I don't think I've heard him in an interview yet not mention The Who or Free or Cream or Thin Lizzy or someone of that
Yeah.
nature. And I think that Blindsided, the song Blindsided with the intro, he's saying is inspired by Won't Get Fooled Again. So you can hear it in that
Oh,
sort of staccato intro that he talks about. But
oh, that's cool.
I think it's interesting to listen to that and to see what comes out. Like he talks about those influences, and then Iron Maiden comes out of that, which is so strange sometimes, or it seems like an odd fit. So I wanted to ask you, if you
Yeah.
look back over your influences, what would seem surprising for people for what came out that you used to listen to? I know I read an interview like 30 years ago when I think you said your parents listened to a lot of soul, and that was a lot of
Hmm.
influence when you were younger. But what
Yeah.
what would people find surprising, do you think, as one of your influences?
Well, I mean, obviously, people that know me and know my records, I don't think there's anything that I would say that would surprise them. But
Mm,
I am not as influenced by hard rock as I am some other genres of music. So like, my first concert that I ever remember seeing was Stevie Wonder,
yeah.
and then shortly thereafter was George Benson.
Wow.
So in an interesting, well, I don't know if it's interesting, but the way I phrase things. I think that my roots are more rooted in American soul music.
Yeah.
I think that's really at the core of what I do. And then, as a young kid, I got into rock and roll and the rock and roll attitude. And then, of course, Iron Maiden was the third live concert I ever saw, because
Wow.
by the time I
Right.
was 12, 13 years old, I was a huge Iron Maiden fan. I liked all the darks, imagery and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
so, so my influence, I guess, is sort of more unique for a guy in the rock camp, in
Yeah.
the hard rock camp, because I really grew up more, influenced by, Curtis Mayfield and
Mm-hmm.
Stevie Wonder and George, and Sly and the Family Stone was a
Yeah.
massive influence on me. So that's kind of my base,
Yeah.
and then from there I branched out into the rock stuff, and then into like the jazz fusion thing. Once I started
Mm.
taking guitar seriously, I'd listen to, like, I had a Mahavishnu Orchestra record, so I listened to John McLaughlin or Al
Yeah.
Di Meola, Turn to Forever. And then oddly enough, I ended up in a band with Stanley Clarke and Lenny
Right.
White, which was
Right.
pretty cool. So, I have that side of me, which is that kind of jazz fusiony R&B soul thing.
Yeah.
So maybe that would, people that don't really know me outside of what I've done with Adrian might be surprised by that.
Yeah. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not surprised by that at all. And it very often comes out in the way you sing and your phrasing. I think vocally too. That's very obvious.
Yeah,
Um,
I listened to, I mean, all those soul singers, like Sam Moore from Sam and Dave was a massive
hmm
influence on my sound. And
Yeah.
then, Terence Trent D'Arby is
Oh yeah.
someone who,
Wow.
his first album, when I heard that, I really was just like, that's it. That's the greatest singer I've ever heard,
Yeah.
period. And he and I now are friends, so it's very surreal.
Yeah.
We're always messaging back and forth. So, and you would know him now today as Sanandra Maitreya, changed his name many
Mm.
years ago,
Yeah.
uh, but still the same mind and the same
Yeah.
talent. And so that, he's a big influence on me, and every now and then I actually ask for advice, and stuff. So
That's
it's
cool.
pretty cool. And Prince was a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
When Prince died, I was really a mess. That was really horrible for me,
Mm.
because he was such an important figure. And Eddie Van Halen,
Yeah.
those are my influences.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's the speaking of vocally too, your and Adrian's vocals match really well. Did you expect that? Was that part of the thing that led you into it? Had you
Well,
heard them?
in the beginning, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
look, it's like you have to start somewhere with this sort of thing. And, when we got together, it was in this room here, and he played the riff, and then we were singing back and forth. And I knew what his voice sounded like, though,
Right.
because we had jammed together at his house a
Right.
few
Okay.
times,
Yeah.
So I knew he could sing, and I knew he sang in a way where the intent is the same as mine. He's, when we talk about singers, we'll talk about our love for Paul Rogers and Steve
Mm.
Marriott.
Yeah.
And so, we have that common ground, Steve Winwood, we have that common ground. And
Yeah.
so that's how we connect.
Yeah. So the writing process again, listen to you guys talk about it, and how you seem really influenced by the lyric and the story in the lyric, and that might seem strange to some people who listen to two guitar players playing an album, that's actually
Uh,
often the driver of the songs for you.
the lyrics, yeah,
Yeah.
because without the lyrics, you don't have a song. Unless
Yeah.
you're doing instrumental music, which I've done. I've done a couple instrumental records in my life. And so, then you don't have to worry about that. But then you have to worry about the melody. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
here you've got to worry about the melody and the lyrics. And without the lyrics, you don't have a song.
Yeah.
And so the lyrics are very important, because that's your story.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
We only have a few minutes left, but I do want to ask you a couple of nerd things, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
going back a few decades.
Oh,
So in '93, the Native Tongue Poison album, I was 18 playing in bands. You weren't much older, but you were playing in a stadium band around the world, and
Yeah.
um, and there's some great tones on that album. For me personally, Fire and Ice is one of the best on the edge, breaking up telly into Vox tones recorded. I think that opening lick is incredible how it sounds. Um, what do you remember about that session? If you wouldn't mind me dragging you back there and giving me a glimpse into the post Shrapnel records, Ibanez, Starfield, Young Richie, and getting to do that,
Oh
probably
yeah.
more
I,
that
I
soulful.
remember I remember everything from back then. You know, and it's funny because I remember it better now than I did a few years ago, because there was a period of time where I didn't really remember much of anything. But now, for some reason, a lot of this stuff's coming back to me very vividly. And I remember really connecting with Richie Zito, the producer, like
Yeah.
instant musical and friendship connection.
Hmm.
And I remember connecting with Brett Michaels very instantly when I met him at his house.
Right.
And this all came to be in a very strange way, because prior to joining the band, was already living in Los Angeles. I was signed to Interscope Records. I was one of the first artists that they signed.
Right. Yeah.
They signed me and Mark Wahlberg, and he had so happy that he had a hit, because I was nervous because I chose them over Atlantic back then. Atlantic was proven, they were a new label, and then Good Vibration blew up, and I was like, okay, good. I got a shot. But sadly, what happened to me, sadly, was that they decided to scrap my album because they didn't agree with the kind of record I wanted to make.
Right.
I had all the songs ready to go, and Danny Korchmar was going to produce it, who had just done End of the Innocents with Don Henley.
Hmm.
And I was super excited because that was my favorite album at the time. And I was going to get to work with him. And I went to Danny's house in Santa Monica, and we picked out like 5 or 6 of my songs that I wrote. And then he and I were going to write a few more and round out the record.
Yeah.
At the last minute, my A&R said, we're not going to do this. We even put the budget in. And then the
Oh,
last minute,
wow.
they're like, we didn't sign you to make this kind of an album. And I was just destroyed. I
Yeah.
was completely destroyed. And I threw a bit of a fit. And I said, you guys are ruining me. And I was only 20 years old at the time.
Yeah.
But, kind of everything was moving quickly. And I said, you don't know what you're doing. You don't. And that was a stupid thing to say, because, it's like Jimmy Iovine's
Offend them.
record label.
Yeah.
I was out of my mind saying that, but I really was very upset. And they said, listen, we're going to do you a favor. We're going to let you out of your contract. You can go find another deal with another label, and they'll let you do what you want. But
Right.
Brett Michaels has been calling me about you. He saw you on
Oh,
the
wow.
cover, 'cause I'm already on the cover of one of the guitar magazines.
Yeah.
And he said he saw you on the magazine and they need a guitar player. Now, my initial reaction was, are you out of your mind? You see the kind of music I'm writing and the kind of
Yeah.
record I want to make. This is like further confirms the fact that I shouldn't be signed to you, because this is like way out of left field. And the guy's like, well, whatever, just go meet him.
Yeah.
So I drove out to Calabasas, and I went to his house, and we sat down, and what he said to me was what changed my whole perspective. He said, well, listen, he goes, I'm looking for a guy that I can write with. I don't just want, someone to come in and do what we've already done. I
Yeah.
want a writing partner. And then we started talking about music. And then we started talking about music that I grew up listening to that I like.
Hmm.
And then I thought, well, I actually have a lot in common with this guy,
Right.
meaning with
Yeah.
Brett.
Yeah. That's
And
cool.
so then, long story short, they invited me to join the band. And so that's how that happened.
Mm.
It's very, interesting how that came together. And I think we made a record that actually reflected our styles pretty well.
Yeah.
If you listen to the song Stand, it's a really kind of a soul. We've got a gospel choir singing on the song.
Yeah.
It
It's great.
doesn't get any more soulful than that for a rock band,
I think you raised their bar as well. Like those guys were
What?
doing their thing, they were doing their glam rock thing, and you really raised the bar for all the players in that band. I think for that, everyone was elevated by you and Brett doing that in that way. I think it just,
And
yeah,
the idea was let's not do what we've already done. Let's follow
yeah,
this influence and see where it goes. And that's what we got. And I think it was a really, to this day, I think it's a great album.
Yeah, that's great.
But you asked me something more specific, and I went on a rant. What did you
That's all
ask
right.
me?
No, it's just about the recording. We do have to wrap it up. I know you've got another interview to do, but it was just about those specific recording sessions. But that's great. The answer is fantastic. What you've just given me there was great. So just to wrap up, then, after 30 albums, 23 of your solo albums, including Nomad last year, you're so damn prolific, and long may it rain. And I just want to say thank you for doing that. It's inspiring to watch you. Come down to Australia, either by yourself or with Adrian. It'd be great to do it with Adrian. Great to see you both do it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this album will take its place in rock history by two genuine legends. So thanks very much for your time, Richie. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Bye.